Today to our new principal, Miss Rosa Maria Redmond, because of her compassion and empathy and willingness to listen to me yesterday. And I wish all of you on this call and all of our campus ministers, because really and truly, I think it's so important for us to be thankful for everything that we do have, despite all of the problems that we have in the world. And Ignatius placed gratitude at the appropriate time at the end of the spiritual exercises, perhaps for a reminder that this is exactly what we are supposed to do, is be grateful to God's gifts. So this prayer, called the Cespedes prayer, I would like everyone to join along with me and say this together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will, all I have, and call my own. You have given to me. To you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Stephen. That is beautiful. The word, by the way, suscipe means offering. So this is a prayer of offering. There have been many versions of this basic prayer over the years. I'm familiar with one that is very common in mercy circles. I'm also close with the Sisters of Mercy, and Mother Catherine Macaulay also had a beautiful suscipe prayer. So an offering to God. And you really hit it beautifully, Stephen, very on point in describing the way that someone like Ignatius came to this understanding of gratitude as almost the necessary response that we have to God's grace in our lives. So let me cue up what we're going to be doing today with a relatively short framing of this prayer of gratitude. And then the bulk of what we're going to be doing is simply a gratitude exercise, all right? So I'm going to invite everybody, as we have in the past, to have something to write with. And there's not going to be small groups this time. We ourselves are a little bit smaller group. So I think it'll work just fine for us to do this wherever we are, but to just write down the things that we're grateful for. And I'm going to move us through this meditation, as you'll see shortly. And at the end, I'll leave some time for us to just simply name some of the things that we have observed, all right? So before I get into actually what I'm going to present, let me just recall for everybody the obvious, namely that doing this prayer today in this time, in this very odd year, is really unlike anything any of us have lived through at any point in our lives. So gratitude in this context of 2020, is very different from even, a year ago or 10 years ago, however long, because frankly, for some of us, and maybe even for many of us, this is going to take a little bit of work. In other words, the items of gratitude may not be the top of our mind. What on the top of our mind may be a lot of just, things that have given us some stress. But here is a principle that is something that I find consistent throughout Christian tradition. We see it manifesting itself in the likes of a St. Ignatius of Loyola. We find it itself being manifest even in a figure like Jan van Roosbroek, who so much influenced Theodor Reichen. The idea that gratitude it's a kind of work. This comes really from Aristotle's philosophy. gratitude is a type of work, but it is a work that is itself life-giving. And so in this context, the work that we are doing may not be the most obvious. It may not be the most instinctual, because again, so many of us are in positions where we're kind of doing the whack-a-mole of, work, life, family. Some of us have people that we're caring for. Some people have been sick. Maybe some of us have lost people. So this is a particular type of work, this gratitude examine. I am, by the way, using this language that really comes to us from Ignatian spirituality, the language of examine. And it's just a Spanish word which means to, an exam, a test, a look back. And I want to suggest these bullet points for thinking about what exactly we're doing in this gratitude examine. And the first point is a little bit of a philosophical. So just give me 30 seconds to wax philosophical for a moment, and then I'll get more to the heart of what we're doing. I'm suggesting that a gratitude examine is delving into memory as an act of interpretation. So every act of memory is at the same time an act of interpreting our experience. So to say it a little bit differently, it's not always what you see is what you get. Experience is multi-layered, and it can be interpreted in any number of ways. So the work that we're going to do today is an act of interpreting our experience through a lens of memory. And I'm using that word of lens, almost as if we're putting on some glasses or some goggles, or we're choosing to see our experience through this lens that we're calling gratitude. And asking what fruit might come from that way of interpreting our experience, all right? And so here's what it's not. It's not ignoring what's been hard. It's not turning a blind eye to the fact that some of us have been, legitimately negotiating serious difficulties. Rather, I would almost describe it as a kind of foraging. Just like if you're, going into the forest and trying to find something to eat, it's not that you're ignoring the fact that there are sticks and leaves and things that aren't edible, but you're looking for what is fruitful. Okay, so again, it's an act of interpreting our experience of the recent weeks and months, and another word, rummaging for God. And I use that phrase, it's in fact the title of an article that I've had my students read for many, many years. I recommend it to any of you in both professional and teaching context. Rummaging for God. I'll be happy to share it with anybody. But real briefly, Dennis Ham, a Jesuit out of Creighton University, has written of this kind of memory as rummaging for God. Where have I found God in my experience? Great essay. I'm very, I use it all the time. So that's what we're doing. We're rummaging for God. We're looking for where God has been present to us in our recent experience. But the other thing we're doing, to that next bullet point, we're changing the pace in which we understand our experience. Which is to say that we normally live our lives, to use an example from, your DVR or your, whatever thing you hit play for. Usually it's at normal speed, but we're taking it down to 0.5 speed or maybe even 0.25 speed. We're going to slow it down. And we're going to take a look at the elements of our experience, slow them down, and really sit with those things that are life-giving. And I won't say a lot more about that, but again, this will become clear as we go. We're going to discover moments where we ourselves have been gifts to others. And I want to invite you to really take that idea seriously. Where have you been a gift to others? Very often in our, I almost think of it as a kind of Christian default or spiritual default. We want to look to what others are doing, but I'm suggesting that we also look to ourselves and ask, where have we been gifts to those around us? And in reference to the short article that I sent out on Friday, or that Ben sent out, noticing our awesome Christian ribbons. Okay, so remember that little article was about the kindergartner who got this awesome Christian ribbon because he was recognized for having done a kind deed for his classmate. Lovely little story. And this school, you know, you get an awesome Christian ribbon. Normally, we don't get those. You know, normally, you know, again, life moves fast. But if we slow down, we might ask, when have we done the things that have been grace to others? And conversely, when have others been gifts to us? And on that last bullet point, noticing or naming the wallpaper of our lives. Wallpaper here, I'm just talking about the things that are in the background very frequently. And here, again, this will become clear in the meditation. But I'm just thinking about what are the things that we used to take for granted until we had to lock down for weeks on end. And I'm sort of saying that you know, maybe it isn't wallpaper, maybe it's another type of paper, but never mind. That's an aside. We won't talk about that. What are those elements of things, you know, that we discovered gratitude for during this very unusual period that we're not entirely out of yet? Okay, so again, with all that as a bit of a wind up, we're going to get into the actual exam in itself. The same rule applies that we did last week. If at this point you would like to go dark, turn off your camera, totally appropriate. That's perfectly fine. Most important is just, again, to have a pen and paper in front of you. You can just keep the audio on. At a certain point, I will call us back to just share some observations. And by the way, this will be completely voluntary. I'm not going to ask anybody to, you know, you got to share what you've written down. So this is for you. So be as specific to your own experience as will be helpful to you. If you want to name something that will just be good for others to hear, that's the kind of thing I'm going to invite us to share a little bit later. Maybe particularly around work. One of the categories that we're going to be looking at is gratitude for things at our work. You know, so maybe that category will be something that we could share later. But again, what you're writing down is strictly for yourself, and you know, I invite you to just be as honest as you can. There's no rush. The other rule I always mention is that if what I am prompting is helpful, use it. If what I am prompting is not helpful, then let it go. If you know, there's a place where if there's a question that you really need to stay with, then stay with it. You know, just catch up with us later. That's perfectly fine. Okay. Enough wind up. Let's get into it. An image that comes from the early days of the church is that our souls are like containers, and we can fill the container of our souls with honey, or we can fill it with vinegar. Vinegar would be, you know, the things that we just kind of appropriate that maybe make us a little bit jaundiced at the world around us and create in us anger and stress and all those, you know, ways perhaps that we find ourselves less capable of being charitable to others. Conversely, we can fill ourselves with honey. And honey is that which gives us joy, lifts our spirits, helps us to be more charitable towards others. So we're filling our containers with honey. And the first way we're going to do that is to just reflect our environment, just the physical spaces in which we have dwelt these last weeks and months. So if you're like me, you can probably remember the early days of quarantine, and the weather was just terrible. It was cold. In fact, it was even kind of bitterly cold. You know, I remember one day, and it was just, you know, had to wear a winter coat out just to walk the dog. And so more recently, in these more recent weeks, there have been these opportunities to just get outside and to enjoy what's outside. So I invite you for these first couple minutes to fill your soul with the honey of reflecting on those moments that have maybe generated gratitude in you. So as you go back over the last few weeks even, the first question is, when have I experienced the warmth of the sun, or a gentle breeze, or the feel of grass underneath my feet, maybe a view of the ocean or of a lake or of a river, or some other beauty of nature? When have I experienced just the beauty of the world around me? And how did it make me feel? Right, and as you reflect on this, try to name that feeling. Try to give words to that feeling. And I would even invite you to apply this, this very Ignatian technique of using your senses. So what did it feel like? You know, was it air against your skin, or maybe water, or maybe sun? What did it smell like? Did it produce a taste in your mouth? What were the sounds? And what were the sights? And as you reflect on that, consider the way that just being in a beautiful place impacts our moods, impacts the way that we feel, impacts the way that we interact with others. And ask yourself, how might I find opportunities to fill my soul with nature's beauty? And again, especially in this time when many of us are not traveling the way we might have in previous years, is there a way that I can lean into whatever beauty is immediately around me, maybe within a short walk or a short drive? But again, come back to that experience of gratitude for the physical space that has inspired you. As we move into this next category of the people in our lives, let me again recognize how challenging this period has been, because obviously we've been separated from many of the people that we hold dear. This is not a bad example for, you know, thinking about what makes this gratitude examine a particular way of interpreting our experience, all right? Because I think we'll all agree that on the one hand, that kind of physical separation has posed many challenges. And it would be very easy to almost get stuck on those challenges. And maybe even those, real sources of pain. Maybe we're not seeing family members whom we love because of this whole situation, okay? So that's real. On the other hand, I have noted on many occasions, I don't know how we would have done this 20 years ago before video conferencing was a thing. I can't imagine what would school have looked like before Zoom or Teams or whichever platform you're using. I don't think we could have done it. I don't think we could have kept in touch with family members, friends, heck, our favorite music stars, whatever, without the wonders of Zoom. So in looking at our experience through the lens of gratitude, we're taking some time now to focus on the people in our lives and beginning with just the question, for whom am I grateful? And this may take a little time because, there are likely a number of people for whom you are grateful. But for this exercise, I'm going to suggest that you focus on maybe one or two people for whom you are particularly grateful. And here, by the way, I'm thinking primarily of close family and friends. We're going to talk about work later, okay? So colleagues, we can talk about in another moment of this examine. But for now, the people that are close to me, I take time to recall particular sensory experiences of those I love. And again, I'm emphasizing the use of our senses here. Why? Because senses are the doorway to our imagination. We grab onto memories through our senses. We see something, we hear something, we touch something, and that has a hold on our memory. And so in this exercise, we're using these sensory experiences to really fill ourselves with the memory of our love for these people in our lives. The sound of their laughter, the look on their faces, or some other memory. Take a moment or two to really encounter the person or the people in your lives for whom you have particular gratitude. And even as you're journaling, even as you're writing some things, maybe even make a note to yourself, how might I want to reach out to this person or just simply talk to this person later today and express what they mean to me? And for this one, I'm going to give us several minutes to just simply sit with. We'll take another minute for this. Okay, moving on to this next prompt. Again, thinking about, I think especially early in our experience of going into lockdown, there were, for many of us, I'm sure, if not all of us, a number of anxieties around some of just the basic things. I think especially those of us who maybe have children at home or who have elderly parents, those that we have to care for. One of the main concerns was just simply making sure that we had access to all of the basic necessities of life. Regardless of where we were in our experience, the need to move into quarantine mode really summoned from all of us a need and a desire to just, simply rethink what we normally take for granted. Okay, so when I said earlier, the wallpaper of our lives, this is part of what I had in mind, that there were things that we were able to take for granted that we suddenly could no longer take for granted. Just to use one very concrete example, there were very serious questions early on about the food supply chain. And, obviously grocery stores were places that looked like nothing I'd ever seen in my previous experience. I suspect that many of us can identify with that. But again, the point is not to think about what went wrong. The point is to ask, again, through the lens of gratitude, how might we look back on some of our recent experiences? And here, it really may be good to even go back to some of those early experiences, March, April, particularly because they were so different, and ask, in those circumstances, where did I find God's grace? And by the way, keep in mind too, this was still Lent. And I remember some people making the observation, didn't quite know what I was signing up for this Lent. Didn't quite know what I'd be giving up, because I ended up giving up a heck of a lot more than I anticipated. It wasn't just the chocolate bar anymore. But let me use one concrete example, maybe just to kind of spur your own thinking about this. I remember early on, we were getting to that point. My wife was really, I myself am very grateful for my wife, because she really got on top of things a lot sooner than I did. And, so she was starting to stock the pantry and this kind of thing. But maybe a couple weeks into the real lockdown phase, I found myself kind of in this position of saying, okay, we've got what we need to eat, but man, I would like a cookie or something sweet. You know, I would just like something that, you know, just tastes good and isn't just nourishing. And we had some old jelly beans, you know, and I just started like, oh man, each jelly bean suddenly was really good because it was just something sweet, you know, and I don't know that I've ever enjoyed jelly beans the way that I did during those early days. So what I'm asking us to consider as we go back in our experience is to look for those kinds of experiences, maybe that were sources of unexpected joy. So the prompt here is I take time to recall moments over recent months when I have taken delight in the simple joys of feeding my family, enjoying basic needs, or discovering new gratitude for ordinary things. New gratitude, unexpected gratitude. You know, whether it's a jelly bean or something else. Where have I discovered gratitude where I perhaps might not previously have discovered it? And again, just take a couple minutes and jot down anything that comes to mind from your experience. Moving on then to the next category. There are two more, just this one and one more. I invite you to pay particular attention now to your work and places where you have discovered sources of gratitude in your work. Two questions. Who are the people that motivate me or call me to my best self? And similarly, whether they are students, whether they are colleagues, maybe parents, alumni, whomever you work with, try to see them, try to maybe even recall conversations and similarly, where have I discovered my work to be life-giving? There have been plenty of places, I'm sure, where many of us have found stress, difficulty, challenge in our workplace in recent months. But what are the sources of gratitude? Not least of which, of course, is that we have work to do in this time when many have experienced job insecurity. This last category, I'm simply calling God's surprises. And I partly have in mind a very fine book written, gosh, probably about 30 years ago, maybe 35, called God of Surprises. Basically, the thesis being that very often where we find grace is in the things that we don't control, the things that we don't exercise full control over. So the question is about that. I take time to reflect on experiences where I've not had full control of my circumstances or attitude. How have I experienced God's grace in these moments? And how has God sustained me in these times? So again, perhaps early on, but even perhaps more recently, have you had the experience of really not feeling like you've got a handle on it, and yet still being maybe not even conscious of it at the time, but as you remember it, being able to recognize God's grace at work in that experience? as we draw this gratitude examine to a close in a minute or so, I would just simply invite you to turn to God in prayer in whatever way is appropriate for you. We'll do this just kind of in individually, just in silence. But if there is anything that this exercise has generated that might even be fruitful to return to tomorrow, the next day, this weekend, to make a note of that. But to simply allow whatever feelings this has generated to bring before God. And here again, I would recall the words of the Suscipe prayer that Stephen shared with us at the top of this, and recall that everything is ultimately a gift of God to us, and that in offering it back to God, in a sense, what we're doing is completing the circle, but we are allowing God to use our own experience, our own memory, to draw us closer to God in order that our life may be greater service to God and to God's kingdom. So again, I just invite you to close in whatever prayer is appropriate. And in a moment, I will just once again invite you to name whatever might be good to just simply share with the folks here on this call that might be nourishing for everyone. So we'll do that in another 30 seconds or so. Okay. I'll sort of gently invite people to come back on as you are ready. So in these last 8 minutes or so, I will just invite any insights. There's no particular prompt to this, but again, I find it helpful to just simply start by asking, how was this exercise? I do this in class with students on a regular basis, and just to name some of those things can, I think, be helpful and very often helpful to others as well. Just a practical note, everyone right now is muted. So if you wish to say something, please just make sure you unmute yourself. I think with 20, we don't probably need to use the video thing. So if you've got something that you would like to share with folks, just wave and then go ahead and unmute yourself. But again, the question is just first, how was the experience? And then second, are there insights that you think might be worth sharing with this group?
Uh, the first prompt captured my attention. I live near some woods, and just this whole spring and summer has been amazing to see what's out there. And I think it's the sense of nothing is required of me. If I take in, I was on a Zoom the other night, and a 8-point buck walked about 20 yards from my patio. There are 4 red-tailed hawks that gather on the same branch and squawk their brains out every morning. I've seen a coyote. And there's nothing I need to do. There's no decision I need to make. And in these times, any time where I don't feel the burden of what really critical decision do I need to make next is a special blessing.
That's remarkable. Paul, where are you? Just out of curiosity, where do you live?
I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, but I live on what used to be 36 holes of golf, and now is a rivers watershed. So
wow. And you wonder if you would have noticed that if you were maybe as busy as you are under normal circumstances. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Carolyn.
First of all, thank you for this. It was a wonderful experience. I think just so calming and just restorative. So thank you, Tim, for this. And it's something I actually do quite often myself in my personal prayer, a gratitude examine. And I've felt the need to do it, especially in these times. So, but having you lead us through was quite a different and, again, restorative experience. The first and the second for me really merged together a lot. I have 4 young children, so we are outside a lot, and we're often running to activities and so on and so forth. But to be home for such a long time and to enjoy our neighborhood, to enjoy our backyard, to enjoy the beach. We've been going to the beach a lot this summer. We're usually at the pool, but this year we're at the beach. And to hear their laughter and to see the fun they're having just in nature, they kind of have merged together for me in a specific way through this exercise. So thank you.
Oh, that's great to hear, Carolyn. I love hearing that. And by the way, there's part of me that in the background is thinking, does this translate to Zoom? I mean, I've done this plenty of times live, but so it translates to Zoom. So thank you for that. And I love the image. I absolutely love that image. Maybe I'll see you at a beach sometime. I know I'm in Natick. I don't know where you are, but you can't be that far. So maybe I'll see you at the beach.
Sounds good.
Oh, Tim, if I can go next. So today is actually the 1-year anniversary of the passing of my father-in-law, who was an amazing man. He's a man of great faith and a man of action, spent his life devoted to other people. And about 22 or 3 years ago, my wife's parents started gathering my wife's family at the beach in New Jersey, Long Beach Island, New Jersey. So he passed away a year ago, a week before our scheduled time at the beach. And obviously it threw it all in doubt, but we went anyway, and we're actually getting ready to go again next week. So the anniversary of kind of gathering again. So really those first 2 things, about nature and about people, right? So you talked about, the people we love most. And so being able to spend that time, with the people I love most, in a place that is just stunningly beautiful. I'm a New England guy and I love the ocean. And I'm always kind of partial to New England beaches, but I have to admit the beaches down in New Jersey are pretty nice as well. And, just looking at the awesome power of nature and being there with the people you love and all the sights and smells and, the good food and, the good company and so forth. So those 2 things kind of all came together for me, and actually at a time where, I probably wasn't appreciating it as much because of all these other crazy things going on. And so stopping and thinking about what we're grateful for, and just gratitude to my father-in-law, who essentially, you know, made the decision with my mother-in-law 20 plus years ago to make this happen every year. So that was very helpful to me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Just a quick housekeeping note. We are just about on the hour. So if you do need to bolt, please feel free. I know that Patrick had to go and John had to go. Whoever wants to stay on for a few more minutes, I will stay on for a few more minutes. You're certainly welcome to do that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that in case anybody does need to bug off. That's actually, no, Patrick, you're still here, but John had to go. Other reactions, responses, other things you want to share? Yeah, Catherine.
I think for me, the thing that I became more gracious for and appreciative for is the quiet. As an introvert, I really like that on the weekends after being in school for 5 days and all the things that go on. But what I've learned is that to try to understand the silence, to try to understand the quiet, and what does that mean for me in terms of how I've dealt with being home or dealt with the isolation of others. And I think the thing that I missed the most, one of the things I missed the most was going to Mass and experiencing the Eucharist. And the first time I got to go back to do that was a very powerful experience for me, because it really did help me to see that my community, my faith community, my church community was more important to me than I realized. And so the graciousness of being able to find a way to celebrate with my church family and my school faith family too, through the silence. I think the silence really helped me understand that a little bit better.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that. I suspect that there are certainly many others. I myself had that same experience. I suspect there are many that have as well. Thank you. Are there any others? Okay, it looks as though, and by the way, thank you all for it says something when a group can be, you know, speaking of silence, Catherine, it says something when a group can be silent in each other's company. I was particularly struck, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but there was an article that I read about Quaker meetings that were done via Zoom, and they were, you know, in some places people from around the world, but a Quaker meeting is mostly silent. And I was very struck by people being on a Zoom meeting, being silent together, but there is something to that. You know, so Catherine, something that you said, and Carolyn, something that you said too. There's something different about just even being in the presence of others and doing a reflection like this. I think there's something that almost like we want to hold each other to it, if that makes sense. Like, we're taking the time, we better do this properly. I come back to what I started with, that a gratitude examen is a type of work, you know. So again, I'm not taking for granted that for some of this might not have been an easy, obvious thing to do, but to kind of be accountable for saying, yes, it is good to give thanks. Yes, it is good to recognize God's grace in our everyday life. That's a fruitful exercise. And by the way, one that any of us here can go back to if it would be helpful, again, later in the day, tomorrow, over the weekend, whenever. That's, you know, as some of you know, and I can tell, but I know for a fact that at least there are a number of us that have a foot in the Ignatian world, or have at a point in our lives had a foot in the Ignatian world. So this language that we're drawing even from that tradition is familiar to many of us. But that said, I want to actually close with something that is a little bit closer to the Zavarian tradition. which is, it strikes me as a sentiment that I think is very appropriate in light of this reflection. I won't screen share it, but it's a quote that comes from Jan van Roospleek. And it's a reflection on just the everydayness of God's grace. He says this: when we're united with God, we remain grounded in the ordinary and flow through everything with common love. I just love that image. When we are united with God, we remain grounded in the ordinary and flow through everything with common love. One of the fruits I find of the prayer of examine is that it is a look backward, but it bleeds forward. In other words, it helps us to even bring a certain mindfulness to the way that we flow through everything with common love. So I would just, invite you in the next days until we meet for the last time next week, to take this prayer, go back to it, it helps. But allow it to maybe even heighten your own sensitivity to what is worth giving thanks for in these coming days. We're happily at a time of the year when slowing down. So let's bring that consciousness with us in these coming days, particularly with those that we love. That's all for me. Unless there's anything that anybody else has. Ben, are you still there? Yeah. Any practical things, or we just on next week?
No, I think we're set. I'll be in touch with our reading for next week and a reminder in a few days.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all.